The explosion lit up the darkness of space like a second sun. Galactic Frontier Outpost 17 had not seen an unscheduled arrival in 3 months, and certainly nothing like this. A Draconis shuttle, its hull torn open and flames dying in the vacuum, spun wildly toward the docking bay. Emergency crews scrambled as the damaged vessel crashed through the magnetic barriers and skidded across the landing platform in a shower of sparks and twisted metal. Daniel Reyes was elbow-deep in specimen containers when the alarm started screaming. The xenobiologist had been cataloging samples from a newly discovered moon, completely absorbed in his work. But the specific tone of the alarm made him drop everything. That was the crash alert. Someone was hurt that he ran through the corridors, pushing past other station personnel, rushing in the opposite direction. Most species fled from danger. Humans, for reasons the galaxy still did not fully understand, ran toward it. The docking bay was chaos when Daniel arrived. Smoke poured from the wreckage of the shuttle. Fire suppression systems coated everything in white foam. Medical teams stood back, their scanners pointed at the ship, but their feet rooted in place. Daniel understood why when he got closer. The survivor crawling from the wreckage was a Draconis, dragons the humans called them. The name fit well enough. The Draconis were massive reptilian creatures covered in scales that could deflect plasma fire. They stood 3 meters tall on their hind legs, with wings that could carry them through volcanic storms. Their jaws could crush starship hull plating, and their breath could melt through anything short of reinforced titanium. The galaxy feared them. Even their allies kept a respectful distance. This one was young, Daniel realized. Smaller than the adults he had seen in holographic recordings. Her scales were a deep crimson, though patches of them seemed dull and gray. She collapsed on the foam-covered floor, her chest heaving, her eyes unfocused. The medical team stayed back. One of them, a 4-armed Kellian named Voss, gestured frantically at Daniel. Reyes, get away from there. That thing could incinerate you. Daniel ignored him. He moved slowly toward the fallen dragon, keeping his hands visible. He had studied Draconis biology for years. He knew they were proud creatures who hated being seen as weak. Approaching carefully was essential. Hey, he said softly, kneeling a few meters away from her. You're safe now. You crashed on a coalition station. We're not going to hurt you. The dragon's eyes focused on him. They were golden, like molten metal, but there was something wrong in them. Something broken. She tried to speak, but only managed a harsh cough. Black fluid dripped from her jaws. Daniel had never seen anything like it. Medical team, he called back. I need a scanner. Now. Voss reluctantly brought one over, keeping Daniel between himself and the dragon. Daniel ran the scan and felt his stomach drop at the results. Flame death syndrome. He had read about it in obscure xenobiology journals. It was a rare condition that destroyed the specialized organs Draconis used to produce their fire. The black fluid was necrotic tissue from those dying organs. This dragon could no longer breathe fire. We need to get her to the medical bay, Daniel said. Are you insane? Voss backed away. Do you know what the Draconis do to their own kind when they lose their flame? They exile them. Cast them out. This one probably fled before they could finish the job. If we help her, we could start an incident with the Draconis Empire. Daniel looked at the young dragon on the ground. She was watching him, listening to every word, understanding exactly what was being said about her. Then file a report and let Director Strand sort it out, Daniel said. But we are not leaving her on the floor. It took 4 humans and an anti-gravity stretcher to move her. The other species on the station watched from a safe distance, whispering among themselves. A powerless dragon. A broken monster. What were the humans thinking? Daniel stayed with her through the medical procedures. The station doctors stabilized her condition, but could do nothing for the dead organs inside her. The damage was permanent. She would never produce flame again. When she finally woke, Daniel was sitting in a chair beside her bed. Where am I? Her voice was raspy, each word clearly painful. Outpost 17. Coalition territory. You are safe here. She turned her head away from him. Safe. What does that matter now? It matters because you are alive. Alive. She laughed bitterly, and the sound was terrible. I am dead. My flame is gone. My people threw me out like garbage. I have no name, no clan, no purpose. I should have died in that crash. Daniel leaned forward. What is your name? I told you. I have no name. The Flameless do not deserve names. Then what did they call you before? She was silent for a long moment. Ashera. They call me Ashera. Ashera, Daniel repeated. I am Daniel, and I disagree with your people about names. She finally looked at him. Those golden eyes were filled with confusion and pain. Why are you here, human? Your kind is weak, fragile. You cannot even survive on half the planets in this sector without protective suits. What could you possibly want with a broken dragon? Daniel smiled slightly. Maybe I just do not like seeing someone suffer alone. I do not need your pity. Good. I am not offering any. He stood up and walked toward the door. Before he left, he turned back. The doctors say you need to eat to regain your strength. There will be food delivered in an hour. I will come back tomorrow to check on you. Do not bother, Ashera said. I want to be left alone. I want to die with whatever dignity I have left. Daniel paused at the door. That is your choice, but I am still coming back tomorrow. He left her alone in the dark medical bay. Ashera stared at the ceiling, trying to summon even a spark of flame from her ruined body. Nothing came. Nothing would ever come again. She was hollow, empty. Everything she had ever been was gone. And yet some small part of her wondered why that strange, soft human had stayed by her side when even her own grandfather had turned away. IT did not matter, she told herself. Nothing mattered anymore. But when the food arrived an hour later, she found herself looking at it for a long time before pushing it away. Into part 1. 3 days passed without change. The food trays went in full and came out untouched. The medical staff stopped trying to engage with their patient. They simply monitored her vitals from a distance and reported to Director Strand that the Draconis refugee was slowly starving herself to death. Daniel Reyes kept coming anyway. Every morning before his shift, he would stop by the isolation chamber. He would sit in the chair beside her bed and talk. Sometimes he talked about his work, the strange creatures he studied, the bizarre ecosystems he had documented on distant worlds. Sometimes he talked about Earth, the blue planet where humans had crawled out of the mud and eventually reached the stars. Sometimes he just sat in silence, reading reports on his datapad, letting her know she was not alone. Ashera never responded. She kept her eyes closed, her massive body curled in on itself, her wings wrapped around her like a shield. But she did not tell him to leave, either. The other station personnel thought Daniel had lost his mind. She is a dragon, Boss told him during lunch on the 3rd day. Even without her flame, she could kill you with one swipe of her claws. Why are you wasting your time? Because no one else is, Daniel said simply. There's a reason for that. Her own people abandoned her. The Draconis do not make mistakes like that. If they decided she was worthless, maybe she is. Daniel set down his fork. Have you ever been worthless, Voss? Have you ever had everyone you know tell you that you do not deserve to exist? The Kellian shifted uncomfortably. That is different, is it? Daniel finished his meal in silence and returned to the isolation chamber. That night, he stayed late. His shift had ended hours ago, but something kept him in that chair beside her bed. Maybe it was stubbornness. Maybe it was hope. He was not entirely sure anymore that he was half asleep when he heard it. A soft sound, almost like a cough. Then another, and another. Daniel opened his eyes and saw Ashera on the floor. She had dragged herself out of the bed and collapsed near the observation window. Her chest was heaving. Her jaws were open, and from deep within her throat came a desperate, straining sound. She was trying to breathe fire. Daniel watched in silence as she tried again and again. Each attempt produced nothing but that terrible rasping sound. Black fluid dripped from her mouth onto the floor. Her body shook with the effort. Finally, she collapsed completely. A sound escaped her that Daniel had never heard before. It took him a moment to realize she was crying. He got up from his chair and walked over to her. He did not try to help her up. He did not offer words of comfort. He just sat down on the cold floor beside her, close enough that she could feel his presence. For a long time, neither of them spoke. Then Ashara's voice came, barely above a whisper. I am powerless. Daniel turned to look at her. Her golden eyes were open now, staring at nothing. tears cutting tracks through the dust on her scales. I am nothing, she continued, her voice cracking. Fire was all I ever was. My people, they did not throw me away because they are cruel. They threw me away because I am empty. A Draconis without flame is not a Draconis at all. I'm just a shell, a dead thing that has not stopped moving yet. Daniel was quiet for a moment. Then he spoke. Humans cannot breathe fire. Ashara's head turned slightly toward him. What? We cannot breathe fire, Daniel repeated. We never could. Not once in our entire history. We have no scales, no claws worth mentioning, no venom, no natural armor. We are soft and slow, and we break easily. By the standards of most species in this galaxy, we should have gone extinct millions of years ago. Ashera stared at him. How did you survive? We adapted. We made tools. We built shelters. We learned to work together because alone, any one of us was prey. Our weakness forced us to become clever, to become connected, to rely on each other in ways that stronger species never had to. That is different, Ashera said slowly. You never had power to lose. No, but we know what it is like to be considered worthless. Daniel met her eyes. When humans first joined the coalition, the other species laughed at us. They called us the soft ones, the fragile ones, the species that needed machines just to survive in space. They could not understand why the galaxy should make room for creatures so obviously weak. What changed? Daniel smiled slightly. We kept showing up. We kept solving problems. We kept finding ways to be useful. Eventually, they stopped laughing. Some of them even started asking for our help. Ashera was silent for a long moment. Her breathing had steadied. The tears had stopped. You think I can do that? She finally asked. Find another way to be useful? I think you are more than your flame, Daniel said. I think anyone who says otherwise is wrong, including you. She looked away. You do not know me. No, but I would like to. Daniel stood up and offered her his hand. It was a ridiculous gesture. She was 3 times his size and could have crushed every bone in his body without effort. But she stared at that small, soft hand for a long time. Then, slowly, she reached out with one massive claw and let him help her back to her feet. I still do not understand you, she said. Any of you. Your species makes no sense. We get that a lot, Daniel admitted. Come on, let us get you back to bed. And tomorrow, you're going to eat something. Why do you care so much? Daniel paused at the door. Because someone should. Ashera settled back onto the medical bed, her body exhausted, but her mind racing. She had spoken more in the last few minutes than she had in weeks. And somehow, impossibly, she felt something she had not felt since her flame died. She felt seen, not as a monster, not as a failure, not as a broken thing to be pitted or feared or discarded. Just as herself, she was still staring at the ceiling when the food tray arrived the next morning. This time, she ate, and when Daniel arrived an hour later, she was waiting for him. Into part 2. Ashera had never tasted anything like human food. The protein blocks the station provided were bland and efficient, designed to meet nutritional requirements without any consideration for pleasure. But Daniel had brought something different that morning. He called it oatmeal with honey, and though the texture was strange and the sweetness unexpected, Ashera found herself finishing the entire bowl. This is what humans eat? She asked, licking the last traces from her jaws. Some of us. Earth has thousands of different foods. This one is pretty simple. Daniel smiled at her empty bowl. I figured we should start easy. It was the first real conversation they had shared. The first time Ashera had spoken without despair dripping from every word. Daniel noticed the change immediately. Something in her eyes had shifted overnight. The emptiness was still there, but now there was a flicker of something else beneath it. Curiosity, maybe, or the first fragile seed of hope. Tell me more, Ashera said, about your people, how they survived. Daniel leaned back in his chair. How much time do you have? I'm not going anywhere. So he told her about the ice ages, when massive sheets of frozen water covered entire continents and humans huddled together in caves to share warmth. He told her about the predators that hunted them, the great cats and wolves and bears that were faster and stronger and better equipped for killing. He told her about diseases that swept through populations like fire through dry grass, killing millions in weeks. We had nothing, Daniel explained. No natural weapons. No automat. We cannot even run particularly fast. Every other species on our planet was better adapted for survival than we were. Then how did you survive? We cheated. Daniel grinned. We made tools. Weapons. We learned to use fire, not from inside our bodies like your people, but from the world around us. We built shelters and clothing and eventually machines. But more than that, we learned to rely on each other. A human alone was prey. A group of humans was a problem. Ashera considered this. Among the Draconis, strength was individual. A powerful dragon needed no one. To rely on others was weakness. What about your weak ones? She asked. The ones who could not hunt or fight. Daniel's expression grew thoughtful. We took care of them. The old, the sick, the injured. We carried them when they could not walk. We fed them when they could not hunt. Some species abandoned their vulnerable members. We protected ours. Why? Because today's vulnerable might be tomorrow's protector. Because everyone has value beyond their current ability. Because we understood that strength is not just about what you can do alone. Ashera was quiet for a long moment. This was so different from everything she had been taught. Among her people, the weak were a burden, a drain on resources. A dragon who could not contribute was expected to remove themselves from the clan rather than slow others down. I want to see, she said finally, how your people live here, on this station. Daniel blinked in surprise. You want to leave the medical bay? You said humans work together. Show me. It took some negotiation with Director Strand, but Daniel managed to arrange a supervised tour of the station. Other species watched nervously as the young dragon walked through the corridors, her massive form barely fitting through doorways designed for smaller beings. But she moved carefully, almost gently, keeping her claws tucked and her wings folded tight against her body. Daniel took her to the engineering section first. There she met Kenji, a human engineer who had lost his sight in an industrial accident years ago. He worked alongside Maria, a pilot who had lost her hearing in a shuttle crash. They communicated through a complex system of touch and vibration, their hands moving constantly as they calibrated engine components. How do they work together? Ashera asked, watching them. Kenji cannot see the control panels, but his hearing is incredibly precise. He can detect problems in the machinery just from sound. Maria cannot hear the alarms, but her visual acuity catches warning lights that others miss. They cover each other's weaknesses, and no one looks down on them for being damaged. Daniel shook his head. They are two of the best engineers on this station. Their disabilities made them find new ways to solve problems. The station would not run as smoothly without them. Ashera watched the two humans work in perfect synchronization. No chum, no piti. Just two people who had found their value despite what they had lost. Later, Daniel took her to the recreation area where humans gathered during their off hours. She saw them playing games, sharing meals, laughing at jokes she did not understand. Some were young, some old, some strong, some frail, but they all mixed together without any obvious hierarchy. Where are your elders? Ashera asked. The ones who command respect. We have a director who runs the station. But outside of work, we are just people. The old teach the young. The strong help the weak. We take turns. This is very strange, Ashera said. I know. Daniel smiled. But it works. That evening, as they returned to the medical bay, a message arrived on Daniel's datapad. His expression darkened as he read it. What is wrong? Ashera asked. A transmission from Infernus Prime. Your people know you survived the crash. Ashara's entire body went rigid. What do they want? Someone named Elder Pyros is demanding your return. He says you must face the tribunal for fleeing exile. The name hit Ashera like a physical blow. Pyros, her grandfather, the one who had personally stripped her name and cast her out when her flame died. He is coming for me, she whispered. Not yet. Director Strand is reviewing the message. There are procedures, treaties. They cannot just take you. But Ashera was not listening. The fragile hope that had been building all day crumbled away. Her people had found her. They would drag her back to face judgment. Everything Daniel had shown her, the possibility of a different life, would be torn away. Daniel watched fear replace curiosity in her golden eyes. Ashera, he said firmly, look at me. She met his gaze. I told you that humans protect their vulnerable. You are one of us now, whether you like it or not. We are not going to let them take you. You cannot stop a Draconis elder. You cannot even stop me if I chose to hurt you. Maybe not, but we can try. Daniel put his hand on her massive forearm. And that is what humans do. We try. Ashera stared at that small hand on her scales. This fragile creature was promising to stand against her own people for her. It was madness. It was impossible. But somehow, impossibly, she believed him. End of part 3. The station counselor was an insectoid named Nyx whose compound eyes could observe thousands of details at once. They noticed everything, from the subtle shifts in body language to the chemical traces left behind by strong emotions. That was why Nyx had requested this meeting with Daniel Reyes. Something was developing that required careful discussion. You have spent considerable time with the Draconis. Nyx began, their voice a soft, clicking sound translated through a device on their thorax. The change in her behavior has been remarkable, but I must warn you about what might be happening. Daniel sat across from the counselor in their dimly lit office. Warn me about what? Draconis bonds. The word hung in the air between them. Daniel had read about this in his xenobiology studies, but only in passing. He had never expected it to become personally relevant. Dragon bonds are rare, Nyx continued. They do not happen easily or often. A Draconis must feel a deep connection, usually formed through shared survival or profound emotional support. When such a bond forms, it is permanent, unbreakable. The bonded dragon becomes devoted to their chosen companion with absolute loyalty. Is that happening with Ashera? Nyx's compound eyes flickered. The signs are present. She watches for you when you're not there. She responds to no one else. Her emotional state is directly tied to your proximity. If a bond forms and you do not reciprocate the depth of commitment, it could cause her significant psychological harm. Daniel was quiet for a long moment. What are you suggesting? That I stop visiting her? I am suggesting you understand the consequences of your kindness. Humans form attachments easily and break them just as easily. Draconis do not. If Ashera bonds with you, she will consider herself yours for the rest of her life. That is not a light responsibility. Daniel thought about the young dragon waiting for him in the medical bay. She had no one else. Her own people had thrown her away. He was the only being in the entire galaxy who had shown her consistent care. If I pull away now, he said slowly, she will think I abandoned her too. Just like everyone else. That is possible. Then I will not pull away. Nyx's antennae twitched, and what Daniel had learned was their expression of surprise. You understand what this might mean? A permanent bond with a being from another species? The complications this could cause. I understand that she needs someone in her corner. If that means accepting whatever bond she offers, then I accept. Daniel stood up. Was there anything else? Nyx studied him for a long moment. No, I simply wanted you to make an informed decision. I appreciate that. But my decision was made the moment she crashed on this station. Daniel left the counselor's office and headed toward the engineering section. He had been helping Ashera learn about station operations, giving her small tasks to complete so she could feel useful. Today they were supposed to observe maintenance procedures in the lower decks. That he was halfway there when the explosion happened. The blast came from the power relay junction, a critical point where multiple systems connected. Daniel was thrown against the wall by the shockwave. When his vision cleared, he saw fire spreading across the corridor. Emergency bulkheads were slamming shut, trapping him in a section that was rapidly filling with smoke. That he tried to move, but his leg would not cooperate. Looking down, he saw a metal beam had fallen across it. Not crushed, but pinned. He could not free himself. The smoke grew thicker. The heat increased. Through the emergency speakers, he heard automated warnings about hull breach containment and oxygen depletion, but he was going to die here. Then he heard something else. A sound that cut through the alarms and the crackling of flames. A roar that shook the walls around him. The emergency bulkhead in front of him buckled. Something massive was hitting it from the other side. Again and again, the metal bent inward, rivets popping loose, structural integrity failing. With a final screaming tear, the bulkhead ripped open, and Ashera forced herself through the gap. Her scales were scorched. Her eyes were wild. She moved through the smoke without hesitation, her massive body blocking the flames from reaching Daniel. When she saw the beam pinning his leg, she did not pause. She simply gripped it with her claws and tore it away like it was made of paper. "Can you walk?" she demanded. "I think so." She grabbed him with surprising gentleness and pressed him against her chest, wrapping her wings around him like a cocoon. Then she turned and charged back through the burning corridor, using her body as a shield against the heat and debris. They burst through into a safe section just as the damaged area vented to space. Emergency crews swarmed around them, but Ashera refused to release Daniel until a medical team physically pried her wings open. "What were you thinking?" one of the responders shouted at her. "You could have been killed." Ashera ignored them. Her eyes were fixed on Daniel as the medical team examined his leg. "Are you hurt?" she asked, her voice shaking. "I will be fine. The leg is not broken." Daniel looked up at her scorched scales, the burns on her wings. "You came for me." "Of course I came for you. You could have died." Ashera knelt, so her massive head was level with his. "You told me that humans survive because they have each other. You said I was one of you now." She pressed her snout gently against his forehead. "You are mine to protect. Nothing will change that." Daniel understood then what Nyx had been warning him about. The bond had formed. Ashera had chosen him, and that choice was permanent. He should have felt afraid. He should have felt trapped. Instead, he reached up and placed his hand on her snout. "And you are mine to protect too," he said. Ashera made a sound he had never heard from her before, something between a growl and a purr. Her golden eyes closed, and she leaned into his touch. The medical team looked at each other in bewilderment. A human and a dragon, bonded. It should have been impossible. It made no sense by the standards of either species. But watching them together, it somehow felt right. 2 hours later, as Daniel rested in the medical bay, with Ashera curled protectively beside his bed, an alert came through the station's communication system that a Draconis warship had entered the sector. Elder Pyros had arrived. End of Part 4. The Draconis warship was a mountain of black metal and barely contained violence. It dwarfed the research station, its weapon systems visible even from the observation deck. Diplomatic shuttles were supposed to arrive unarmed. Elder Pyros had made no such gesture. Daniel stood at the main docking port with Director Strand and a small group of station personnel. His legs still ached from the accident, but he refused to sit this meeting out. Behind him, kept back by security protocol, but watching through a viewport, was Ashera. The airlock cycled open, and Elder Pyros stepped onto the station that he was ancient. His scales were the color of dried blood, scarred and cracked from centuries of battle. One of his eyes was missing, replaced with a glowing cybernetic implant. His wings were tattered but still enormous, and when he spread them slightly, the temperature in the docking bay seemed to rise. Flames flickered at the corners of his jaws. With every breath point, 4 honor guards flanked him, each one large enough to crush a human with minimal effort. Pyros surveyed the welcoming committee with open contempt. When his remaining eye found Daniel, it lingered. "You are the one," the elder said. His voice was like stones grinding together. "The human who has been interfering with Draconis affairs. My name is Daniel Reyes. I am a xenobiologist on this station. I did not ask for your name. You are irrelevant." Pyros turned to Director Strand. "I am here to retrieve the exile. She fled her judgment and must be returned to face the tribunal. This is internal Draconis business. It does not concern your coalition." Director Strand was a small woman with gray hair and eyes that had seen too many political battles to be intimidated easily. "The individual you are referring to requested asylum on this station. Under coalition law, she cannot be forcibly removed without a formal hearing." Pyros laughed. The sound was like thunder. "Coalition law. Do you think your laws apply to a Draconis elder? Do you think your treaties will stop me from taking what belongs to my people?" "If you try to take her by force," Strand replied calmly, "you will be starting a war with Earth. The Elder's flames burned brighter. A war with the soft ones? The flameless monkeys who cannot survive without their machines? You threaten a Draconis with war. I am not threatening. I am informing you of the consequences. Pyros took a step forward. The honor guards moved with him. The human security team tensed, but did not retreat. Daniel stepped between Pyros and the director. Elder Pyros, he said, keeping his voice steady despite his racing heart. I understand that Ashera broke your laws. I understand that among your people, a dragon without flame is considered worthless. But she has value here. She has proven that in the weeks since she arrived. Pyros looked down at Daniel with something between amusement and disgust. And what value does a broken dragon have to creatures like you? She saved my life. She tore through burning metal and carried me through fire because she refused to let me die. That is not worthless. That is courage. Courage without flame is nothing. Then your people are blind. Daniel did not flinch. Ashera is more than her flame. She is intelligent, capable, and loyal. She has found a new purpose here, one that does not depend on what organs are working inside her body. If you cannot see that, the limitation is yours, not hers. For a moment, silence filled the docking bay. Pyros stared at this small human who dared to lecture an elder about value and purpose. The flames at his jaws flared, then subsided. You have bonded with her, Pyros said slowly. It was not a question. Yes, a human and a dragon. It is unnatural, perverse, maybe, but it is real, and I will not let you take her. Pyros could have killed Daniel with a single breath. Everyone in the room knew it, but the elder did not move. Instead, he turned toward the viewport where Ashera was watching. Come here, he commanded. Ashera hesitated. Daniel nodded to her. Slowly, she walked into the docking bay and faced her grandfather. Pyros studied her for a long moment. The burned patches on her scales, the scars from her crash, the way she positioned herself slightly in front of Daniel, protecting him even now. You fled your judgment, Pyros said. You dishonored your clan by refusing to accept your fate. My fate was death, Ashera replied, her voice trembling but firm. Not a clean death, not a warrior's death, just a slow fading away while my people pretended I did not exist. That is the way of the flameless. Then the way of the flameless is wrong. Ashera raised her head higher. These humans, these soft creatures you despise, they showed me something your people never did. They showed me that I could be more than my flame. They gave me purpose. They gave me a reason to live. And you would choose them over your own kind. Ashera looked at Daniel, then back at her grandfather. My own kind threw me away. These flameless creatures picked me up. Yes, I choose them. Pyros was silent for a very long time. The tension in the room was suffocating. Then he turned to Director Strand. I wish to speak with the human alone. Strand looked at Daniel. He nodded. Clear the room. The director ordered point one by one. The personnel filed out. Ashera was the last to leave, her eyes fixed on Daniel with obvious worry. I will be fine, he told her. She did not look convinced, but she left with the others. When the docking bay was empty except for the two of them, Pyros folded his wings and sat down heavily on the metal floor. The motion made him seem suddenly old. Tired. Sit with me, human, he said. Daniel Saturday. You have no idea what you have done, Pyros said, his voice quieter now. What you have awakened in her. I have an idea. The counselor warned me about Draconis bonds. Then you know this is permanent. She will never leave you, never abandon you. Even if you abandon her, she will remain devoted until her last breath. I do not plan to abandon her. Pyros studied him. Why? What do you gain from this? Daniel considered the question. Nothing. I gain nothing. That is not why I did it. Then why? Because she was alone. Because she was hurting. Because someone should have helped her, and no one did. Daniel met the elder's gaze. Is that so hard to understand? Pyros was quiet for a long moment. When he spoke again, his voice was different. Softer. My daughter had the same condition. Ashara's mother. Daniel felt something shift in his chest. What happened to her? She took her own life rather than face exile. I found her body in the morning. Pyros closed his remaining eye. I have carried that guilt for 40 years. I became hard because softness felt like betrayal of her memory. I enforced the old laws because changing them would mean admitting she died for nothing. She did not die for nothing. Her daughter survived. Pyros opened his eye and looked at Daniel with something that might have been respect. You truly believe my granddaughter has value beyond her flame? I know she does. I have seen it. The elder stood slowly. His flames had dimmed to almost nothing. I cannot undo a lifetime of tradition with a single conversation, but perhaps I can begin to question it. He moved toward the airlock where his shuttle waited. Tell Ashera that no one will pursue her. Tell her that her grandfather saw something today that made him wonder if the old ways are always the right ways. What did you see? Pyros paused at the airlock. I saw a human stand against a draconis elder for the sake of a broken dragon. And I saw that broken dragon become whole again. He looked back one more time. Perhaps there is more than one kind of fire in this galaxy. Then he was gone, and Daniel was left alone in the empty docking bay, wondering if he had just witnessed the beginning of something unprecedented. End of Part 5. 6 months had passed since the warship departed from Outpost 17. 6 months since Elder Pyros had walked away without his granddaughter. In that time, everything had changed. Ashera had been officially granted asylum by the Coalition, but she had done much more than simply survive. Director Strand, recognizing her unique position as the only draconis willing to work with humans, had appointed her as a liaison between the station and draconis trade vessels that passed through the sector. At first, the dragons had been openly hostile, refusing to acknowledge a flameless exile. But Ashera had handled them with patience and dignity, translating not just language but culture, helping both sides understand each other in ways that had never been possible before. She had found her purpose. Just as Daniel had promised she could, the station had grown used to seeing them together. The massive crimson dragon walking beside the human xenobiologist, their heads tilted toward each other in constant conversation. Some species still found it strange. Others had begun to admire it. A few had even started asking questions about human bonding customs, curious about how such a connection could form across such different beings. Daniel was in his lab when the communication came through. A priority message from Infernus Prime, marked with Elder Pyros' personal seal. Ashera was beside him when he opened it. The message was simple. The Draconis Council had convened to discuss proposed changes to the exile laws. Elder Pyros had spoken before the assembly for 6 hours, describing what he had witnessed on Outpost 17. The vote had been narrow, but the motion had passed. Flameless Draconis would no longer be automatically exiled. Instead, they would be given the opportunity to find alternative service, to prove their value through means other than flame. It was not full acceptance. It was not equality, but it was a beginning. They listened. Ashera whispered, her voice catching. He actually changed their minds. Daniel put his hand on her forearm. He saw what you became, what you could be without your flame. He could not ignore that. This does not fix everything. The stigma will remain. Many will still see the flameless as lesser. Maybe, but it gives others a chance you never had. Ashera was quiet for a long moment. Then she made that sound Daniel had heard before, the one that was part growl and part purr. I never thanked you properly, she said. For what? For sitting with me in the dark. For refusing to let me give up. For showing me that weakness can become strength if you find the right purpose. She lowered her massive head until her snout touched his shoulder. You saved my life, Daniel Reyes. Not by fighting or being powerful, just by being present, by caring when no one else did. Daniel leaned against her, feeling the warmth of her scales even without any inner flame to heat them. You saved my life too, he reminded her. Literally, with the fire and the collapsing corridor. That was different. That was instinct. What you did was choice. She pulled back slightly to look at him with those golden eyes. You chose to see me as more than broken. That is worth more than any rescue. They stayed like that for a while, two beings from different worlds who had somehow found each other in the vast emptiness of space. Later that day, a delegation from a newly contacted species arrived at the station for their first formal meeting with the Coalition. They were small, nervous creatures called the Veluri, and they seemed terrified of nearly everything. The Draconis warship escorting their convoy had not helped their anxiety. Director Strand asked Ashera to be present for the welcome ceremony, hoping her experience with cross-species relations might help ease the tension. Ashera agreed, and Daniel accompanied her. The Veluri delegation flinched when they saw the dragon. Their leader, a trembling creature barely half a meter tall, tried to hide behind their translator. Ashera knelt slowly, making herself as small as possible, and spoke in soft, measured tones. "Please do not be afraid," she said. "I know I look frightening, but I promise I am not here to hurt you." The Veluri leader peeked out from behind the translator. "You are Draconis. You're kind. We have heard stories. The stories are probably true. My people can be dangerous, but I'm not my people anymore. I found a new family here." She gestured toward Daniel and the humans gathered around them. "They taught me that strength is not about how much you can destroy. It is about how much you can protect." The Veluri leader stared at her for a long moment. Then, hesitantly, they stepped forward. "You truly believe that?" "I know it. I lived it." Ashera extended one massive claw, keeping it perfectly still. "May I offer you a human custom? They call a handshake. It is how they greet new friends." The tiny alien looked at the claw that could crush them without effort. Then they looked up at the dragon's face, seeing not a predator, but something else entirely. They reached out and touched Ashera's claw. "We accept your greeting," the Veluri leader said, their voice steadier now. "And we would like to learn more about this new family of yours." That night, Daniel found Ashera on the observation deck, staring out at the stars. He sat beside her in comfortable silence. "A young one approached me after the ceremony," Ashera said eventually. "One of the Veluri children. They asked me if it was true that I cannot breathe fire." "What did you tell them?" "I said it was true. I have no flame." Ashera's eyes reflected the distant stars. "They asked if that made me sad." Daniel waited. "I thought about it for a long time before I answered. A year ago, I would have said yes. I would have said that losing my flame was the worst thing that ever happened to me, that I was empty and broken and worthless. And now," Ashera turned to look at him. For the first time since he had known her, she was smiling. Not the bitter, self-mocking smile of those early days, but something genuine and warm. "I told them that I was sad once, but then I found something that burns brighter than any flame." "What is that?" "Purpose." She pressed her snout gently against his head. "Connection. Love. The things that humans showed me were possible even without fire. The things that matter more than power ever could." Daniel smiled back at her. "That is a good answer. It is the truth." She settled her massive body around him, her wings creating a shelter against the cold of space visible through the viewport. "Thank you, Daniel, for giving me a chance to find it." He leaned against her, feeling the steady rhythm of her heartbeat, knowing that somewhere in the galaxy, a small crack had formed in ancient traditions of cruelty and exile. Knowing that because one human had refused to leave a broken dragon alone in the dark, everything had begun to change. The stars burned overhead, distant and eternal. But the warmth between them was closer and more powerful than any fire, and that, Daniel thought, was the most human thing of all. Into Part 6.